Hello, everyone. As is introduced as Joe Provo, I'm speaking for the ARIN, myself and Chris Tassett are shepherds for this policy, ARIN 2019-12. Sort of okay that we accelerated this because it's kind of a complementary policy to the previous one we just saw. This is M&A legal jurisdiction exclusion. Next slide, please. It's my first time impersonating Mr. Curran in doing this intro. This came about started April of last year, so it's a little over a year old. The language was mostly accepted with a little wordsmithing when we got to draft policy. It went to a meeting, got a lot more comments. There was a lot of activity on PPML, mostly focused on a few specifics of language and ensuring that it was not too narrowly scoped in terms of merger, acquisition, reorganization. And the latest version, based on all feedback from parties involved, was cut in late January. And next slide, please. And the staff and legal review. ARIN staff understands this policy is to mean that the surviving entity of specifics will be permitted to continue holding any number of resources issued by ARIN prior to said transfer, regardless if they cease to have a real and substantial connection to the ARIN region. You'll note this is complementary to the previous policy as indicated. Next slide, please. In addition, they will not qualify to receive any additional number of resources from ARIN unless they once again established a real and substantial connection with the ARIN region. Real and substantial connection would be decided in accordance with the ARIN NRPM. Next slide, please. The staff comments were just clarifying that we're sticking to the NRPM, that this is not providing any sort of, we're not introducing a new loophole that is outside of the NRPM. The staff would manage the resources, same as any other resources, and just emphasizing that a new RSA would be needed to be signed by the surviving entity. Next slide, please. The legal assessment was no material legal issues. There were no significant resource impact either. You'll be familiar with this text, those who have been here before, because it's pretty much what we see for a minimal impact proposal. Next slide, please. And then the Shepherd presentation. Go ahead to next slide, please. To revisit the problem statement, it is that a merger and acquisition activity sometimes results in a survival legal entity that is not in the ARIN service region, but may prefer to continue the pre-existing relationship with ARIN. Again, I said a couple times this is sort of complementary to the policy that RS just proposed, where an organization in that scenario divested from the region and chose to transfer to another RAR. In this case, an organization is divesting from the region and wishes to maintain its relationship with ARIN. So imagine a case where a global company has decided to discontinue service, shuttered its regional offices, laying off employees, canceling region customers, and repurposed network resources and number resources in the rest of its global its holding in, say, Europe, and dissolves its US legal entity. In that case, this organization decided to choose to continue its relationship with ARIN rather than, say, transferring to RIGHT. And the current policy requires the real and substantial test, and this allows that legal jurisdiction exception. So it is cited in the reviews as an infrequent corner case, so that's just highlighted. I gave you one example verbally here. Further examples are cited within the policy text. Next slide, please. And so the actual text of the policy statement has grown since it was originally put together because there were some certain concerns regarding the phrasing, potentially excluding certain types of organizations. So to be consistent, it is referring to merger, acquisitions, and reorganization activity, as that's the text that we use elsewhere in the NERPM. That activity resulting in a survival entity outside of the region shall be permitted to continue holding any number of resources directly or indirectly, and allocated by ARIN prior to the merger, acquisition, reorganization activity. Becomes a bit wordy to say. My apologies for the pause there. But shall not qualify for any additional numbering resources directly or indirectly from ARIN unless and until it once again has a real and substantial connection with the ARIN region as required by the Number Resource Policy Manual. A bit of a long way to say it, but the directly or indirectly was to address concerns people had regarding subdelegations, and the merger, acquisition, resource reorganization activity, as I indicated, is to be consistent with language elsewhere. And we are clarifying that this is not any sort of get out of free, any sort of free pass to further resources, that this is solely about resources that were being held prior to the reorganization. Next slide, please. And that's where we are.